We have two speakers today from the Media Trust. One is based in the US and the other one is based in the UK. Alex Calic is based in the US and Matt O'Neill is based in the UK. Now, I don't know about you, I personally love the websites that offers me a fantastic 17 banner long ad experience. And apparently what Media Trust does is they help clean up that experience that I don't get to see the 17 banners on the homepage. So I will be incredibly disappointed, but I'm sure that every other reader in the world will absolutely love their user experience after you know how Media Trust can help in this regard. Go ahead, guys.
Thank you, Nikolai. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you everyone for coming. So today we're going to talk about the digital ecosystem. Some of the things that you know and you can control are things that you already know about. We're going to try to focus on all the other things that you don't control that you allow into your environments that can cause problems. So a little bit more background on the Media Trust, since we aren't that well known of an entity. We have been around for over 10 years. We've primarily worked with the revenue and ad operations departments of digital media and e-commerce companies around the world. So our focus has always been on providing ad quality monitoring and protection services. We'll get into a little bit more on how that works, but essentially ad operations folks have things that they want to be monitored. We implement those rules and then we find when things are breaking those rules and how to fix them. We're based in Washington, DC, but we have infrastructure in 65 countries around the world, so regardless of where your audience is, we can become that audience. We can become any user on the internet, both desktop and mobile, from any country essentially around the world. And we work with some of the biggest publishers and all the ad technology providers that plug into them. So it gives us a bit of a unique view of the world. So a little bit of state of the union on digital media. So as there's more and more processes put on publishers to implement, to increase revenue, to increase experience and sharing and all that, there's an increasing amount of code that gets placed on those websites. And a lot of times you are using other third parties to implement that code, and Matt's going to go into this in just a brief moment. What is happening though, as more and more code gets added to websites, is that it is leading to three problems. One is a decline in performance, so performance is the user experience, but it's also increasing the risks around malware, malvertising, so malicious code that lives and breathes through the ad ecosystem and through web pages, as well as increases data privacy issues, both from the publisher perspective and the user perspective. And so, as we're seeing with consumers, they're doing two big things that don't help publishers directly. One, they're consuming content on third-party channels and news feeds and social networks, right? So Google has AMP, Facebook has its own direct service, Apple News, right? There's other places to grab content from. And ad blockers, that's a big topic of conversation. Obviously, German market, it has probably one of the highest penetrations of ad blockers, but that's what users are doing to combat some of these risks. So what we're going to try to cover is kind of these three areas, how to clean them up, and ultimately how to bring back those audiences and the revenue associated with those audiences. Matt.
Thanks, Alex. Hi guys, nice to be here. Yeah, let's take a look at some of the things that are happening on web pages that we don't see. As I've been working with the Media Trust, the analogy I use is similar to like getting in a glass-bottom boat, where when you get in the boat and you look at the sea, you can't really see what's underneath it, but you get in and you look at the glass bottom and all of a sudden everything that's happening beneath you becomes very, very apparent. So let's take a look at a web page. This is a web page, or a simple web page. So what's on there? Well, there's some stuff that we can see. There's articles, the stuff that people want to see, why they go to that web page. There's videos, maybe they're related to the content, maybe they're videos that are featured for that site. There's advertising. Oh no, that's probably not advertising, that is slideshows, sorry. And there is a search bar, and there are of course ads, and widgets like the weather and stock reports, et cetera. Now all of these are being called by little snippets of code on the page that are rendering them within the page itself. And each of those calls is either happening on the first party or it's happening off the site and calling off to a third party. In addition to the things that you can see on the page are lots of calls reaching out to analytics companies, tag management companies, DMPs, networks, any number of third parties can be involved in actually pulling that page together and pulling the analytics and data around it. Some of it we know what it's there for, some of it we don't know why it's there. I've heard publishers complain that they don't know about what half the things on their site that they get revealed are actually doing there. So here's an imaginary page that we've cobbled together like Frankenstein's monster of a German publisher site. We can see lots of different things going on here. And one of the stats that we've observed over time is that roughly 78% of the code on any given page is outside of the publisher's control. They didn't put it there. It was not designed by their CMS, it was not designed by their team. It's essentially unknown visitors doing, whatever they might be doing on that site, which I think is a pretty astounding number. And one of the ways that things can one of the things that can happen with these tags is malware. Right, so malware can get injected really anytime you have a third party coming onto your website. The Media Trust essentially looks at three areas, which is privacy, security, and performance. Thank you, Alex. And the first thing we're going to take a look at here is malware. So these are some pretty astounding stats, I think. 400,000 new malicious programs are detected. 85% of all malware is distributed via the web. 58% of malvertisements were delivered through news and entertainment websites. 67% of websites distributing malware are legitimate sites that were compromised. And traditional security tools miss up to 100% of malware. From our perspective, as a company that's scanning for malware, we see incidents of malware across our customers at least once every 60 seconds. So it's out there, it's prevalent, and all of these different code snippets are vectors for it to enter. So this is how we typically think about the ad ecosystem working. A moderately complex landscape where a user goes to a browser, there's some calls on that browser that reach out to some first-party content. It asks the ad server, do you have any ads for me? The ad server renders those ads on the page. The user reads the content and moves on. That would be great. The reality of the situation is a bit more complex. You can see for this one piece of analysis, there are 63, that's what this number is here, 63 individual calls happening. And remember, that's just for one ad placement on the page. There's similar call chains happening for each additional ad call on the page, not to mention analytics calls, et cetera. So you can imagine what the impact there is, not just to the performance of the site, but also to opening the doors to potential malware. It'd be like trying to run a nightclub and just having a million doors and one bouncer on your front door. It would not be very prudent to do that. So these are some examples we've seen over the years of different types of intrusion methods, and pretty much no one is safe in the ecosystem. The first example is an ad server incident coming in through OpenX. Another is an identity management tool. And more recently, just a few months ago, was through PageFair, which is an ad blocker that enabled malware to get propagated through their system and affected hundreds of publisher sites. So really anything that is happening on your site is a potential door springboard for a bad actor in that ecosystem. And then it's not just long tail sites, which is a really common misconception, is that, I'm a premium publisher, I don't really need to worry about malware. And it's actually sort of the exact opposite. If you wanted to spread malware, would you put it on a bunch of sites that no one goes to, or do you want to put it on a site that lots of people go to? So actually, big premium sites are quite at risk for malware because they're known, they're in the crosshairs. Performance, Alex, over to you.
Great, so Matt's touched on malware, I'm going to touch on performance and privacy. So, on the performance side, there's an old saying that speed kills. doesn't matter when it comes to web pages. So when the web was first born and we all had dial-up modems, people would put up with having slow load times. As broadband penetration has increased and speeds have increased, people have become less patient with the amount of time it takes something to load. So here's one survey looking at kind of where that breakpoint is for consumers, at sort of that 2-second mark where they expect the page to load, and then when they start abandoning. E-commerce companies were the first ones to kind of look at for every second in response time it took for the page to load, what the abandonment rate was. Well, that's an important metric now for media companies as well, right? If I abandon your page, that is one less page I consume, that could be 5 less pages I consume. So you want to keep that user engaged and moving through your site as quickly as they want to move through it. So this is a sort of a desktop-based look at the issues. With mobile, things have now sort of gone back to the Stone Ages, where things take a long time to load. And this is a study done by the New York Times, September of last year. And what it shows in the yellow plus the blue is essentially how long it takes for each of these sites to load on mobile. As you can see, the yellow line is the predominant amount of time, and that's all within the advertising piece. So for many of these sites, half of the load time, up to 80% of the load time is all due to the ad tech piece. The delivery of ads is slowing down the page that much. Not only that, we're also seeing studies that show that half to 80% of the data consumed on consumers' plans now is a result of the ads that are loading. So we have a whole new problem within mobile. Ads are a big culprit of it, and that's why you're seeing sort of this ad blocker piece pop up a lot lately. So on to privacy. Privacy has a two-way street. There's the privacy of you as a publisher, what are your rules and what you allow and don't allow, and there's also the consumer privacy. So what we wanted to do is kind of take a look into the German market since we're here in Berlin today, and kind of see what an average site looks like. So we looked at Alexa top 500 sites across Germany. We pulled out e-commerce sites. We pulled out sites that were based in the US and focused on web properties that were owned and operated by German media companies. And what we found was 27 sites that were across 12 different German media companies. You can see their logos here. And some of the results are pretty surprising. So if we look up top at the overview piece, domains is the number of unique URLs called, and vendors is the companies behind them. So someone like Google might have Google Analytics, Google as an ad server, Google as an ad network, and that's 3 domains related to one vendor. As you can see, the disparity between the high and low, and this is per site, so the worst offending site, I'm not going to name them, in the German market had over 140 cookies dropped on our system over the course of a week. Now I can guarantee you that they probably know and control less than 10% of that. So for all the data management platforms that people are using and all the monetizing of data that people claim to want to do, there is massive amounts of leakage happening across these websites by allowing third-party code to run on your site. Then if we look at it by breakdown, the big culprits in this ecosystem are ad operations companies and data trackers. So ad operations companies are buy-side platforms, ad exchanges, sell-side platforms, ad servers, DMPs on the data side, data companies, research companies, and those kind of companies. So once again, the half of the issues kind of live within the ad operations, the ad tech world when it comes to the domains that load and the cookies that they're being exposed by. So we want to take one more cut of this data and kind of look at cookies by length of time. So when someone sets a cookie on your machine, it has a lifespan. It can be a session, it can be a day, it could be a week, it could be longer. So we took a cutoff of 1 year, which is probably too long for most publishers, but we thought it was at least a fair enough place to start. As you can see, on average, every site had at least 20 cookies dropped on the user that could track that user for at least 1 year. So imagine you spend all this money, all this time, creating all this great content, marrying it with some advertiser, that user comes to your site, now that advertiser, their buying platform, their ad network now has you as an audience for that particular ad. They can go buy you elsewhere for cheaper. They can retarget you with ads from one of the competing advertisers. They can sell that audience to other publishers who want it. So this is a huge, huge issue. And then just for giggles, we decided to look at what are the worst offending cookies. I don't know if anyone's been on the internet for 68 years, and why would you need a cookie to last that long, but that is the worst one, going down to about 8 years, sort of the top 5 worst offenders. Many of these companies are fairly well known, so it's, it could be somewhat surprising to some people to see that. So we've touched on sort of the 3 pieces that get mostly exposed through the third-party code that runs on sites: malware, performance, and privacy. They are outside of your control. You basically allow vendors to come into your site. You have relationships with them. Once they're on your site, you don't have control as to what they do or how they do it. So some final thoughts. I'm going to hand it over to Matt to kind of give some takeaways and action items on what to do.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, it's just fascinating to me how much activity is going on websites. Even though I've been working with the Media Trust for a while now, I continue to be shocked by how much is actually going on behind the scenes. So there are quite a few things that publishers can do. A lot of this comes down to vendors, right? So the people that you're working with as a publisher, even if they're not the one dropping the cookie or the one inserting the code, they're essentially the vector for that code getting into your site. So a lot of the takeaways here really come under the umbrella of asking smart questions of your vendors and really having a strong communication channel with those vendors. So being able to identify third-party vendors for potential exposure points is really important. So do you have that glass bottom boat that you can put on your site and see who's doing what on your site and when? Do you know who that company is? How are they getting on your site? Which of the vendors you're working with are bringing them into the equation? Can you minimize the number of vendors that you're working with? Can you do the same or more with fewer? If you've got fewer moving parts, it's sometimes easier to make sense of what each of those are doing. I'm not going to read all of these one by one. You guys can take a look at this. We're going to send the deck out afterwards. What do you need to do to vet? What questions can you ask of a new vendor that you're bringing into your ad ecosystem or your content ecosystem to flag up potential vulnerabilities or exposures on your site? Can you terminate or blacklist vendors that are misbehaving? If one vendor ends up being responsible for a large majority of site performance impact or malware or bad ads, can you blacklist them? Can you push back on them proactively to get them off your site? And what are you doing to sort of monitor this on an ongoing basis? What analytics are you doing? What are you able to get out of your own ad systems or your vendors or your partners to be able to make sense of what's happening on your site and extract that? What reports do your ad technology and ad operations teams need to make informed decisions about that site? Do they have the tools they need? And if not, where can you get those tools? And really just scan your sites to make sure that you know what's happening on them. At the end of the day, that relationship is between you and the consumer, regardless of where that site, the information is coming from. So it's up to you to maintain that vigilance and know what's happening with your site and who's bringing it there. So those are some of the final takeaways and actions that we thought of. Is there anything else you could think of?
Nope.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. I think that's pretty much it. We've got time for questions, certainly. Thanks.
Let me kick off with the first question. Thanks very much, guys, for a great presentation. So you've done your research. You've analyzed a number of sites in the German market. You've highlighted some of the biggest offenders, and some of them are quite shocking, I think, to from a consumer standpoint. I don't think consumers realize exactly what's going on when they go to these sites. But if you're a publisher, as a friend of mine says, you come to Jesus and you have this conversation with yourself and you say, right, I have made a mistake of putting all of this on my site, but there's so much I have to clean up. How do I prioritize these risks?
It's a good question. Unfortunately, the way most publishers deal with this is based on incidents. So I'm not going to do anything until something very bad happens. I get called out in The Guardian for having malware on my website. Oh crap, I have to go find a solution for that. Or this page won't load and users are sending emails and complaining about it. Oh crap, this ad's too big, I need to implement performance monitoring. Usually it's very reactionary. Ultimately, the best way is to be proactive, and where we see most of the issues, honestly, are within that ad tech ecosystem, so the ad tags that live on the web page, maybe it could be 1, 2, 3 of them. It's those third parties that aggregate demand from multiple sources that are the ones that are going to create the most potential for issues, because there are N number of folks that plug in that they don't control, and they have their friends and so on. So starting within the ad tech ecosystem, the third parties that you have relationships with is probably the most efficient way if you had to start with one place.
And do you give the publishers sort of a pre-vetted list of different sort of vendors that you recommend that they work with, that you've done some work with, and you can vouch for them in a way?
Yeah, no, we don't. We don't offer that list because it's not that the vendors themselves are being nefarious. What we offer is effectively the tools for publishers to be able to get that view into who's doing what on their site. And then they can use that list as a starting point to start having those conversations. Like, oh, hey, Mr. Vendor, why are you dropping 150 cookies on our site? We thought you weren't doing that. So you can start that conversation, but that vendor may not be doing that with other sites, right? A lot of what we do and can observe is based on what's actually happening in the real world. So we don't kind of have a starter pack that says, these are the bad vendors, don't work with them. It's more that what we do is offer you the tool set that allows you to make those informed decisions yourselves around your business. And in terms of the prioritization, I think that if you can normalize it around some type of maybe revenue metric, are my users leaving in droves because of site performance and going somewhere else, going to like Google AMP, or am I just having tons of malware run on my site? So, and what does that cost to my business? I think that each business will probably have a different answer to that, but having the tool set available to you to make those decisions is really, really important.
And in your experience, what news site does it best in terms of optimizing the user experience? What news site is best?
Well, there are a few sites, US-based sites, that focus solely on direct advertisements, so they work directly with the agency, directly with advertisers. They ultimately will have the best experience because, as Matt was explaining in the one chart, when the user comes, it just makes a request to the ad server returns the creative. It is a very simple relationship versus I visit a website, I have third-party code, that third-party calls out to these guys. Remember, there were 63 domains. Even if those take a fraction of a second to call, if you add that up, that's many, many seconds later that the page actually loads. So the more direct, it's a nirvana. Every publisher wants to own all the advertisers directly. You can't. So it's, they're great examples, but they're not reality.
I think one of the points that you've made, we'll get to your question in a second, was about the amount of traffic that goes onto that the user has to spend to waste out of their data allowance on their phones that is purely ad driven. So the end user is now ending up paying twice. They get a poor user experience, and they're also paying for that poor user experience through the data allowance.
Yes.
So we've got a question here.
So what do you guys offer then? Like a managed tag manager, a secure tag manager, or what?
So we don't provide any code that lives on the website or on the web page, so we don't provide it, we don't cause latency, we don't cause security risk. What we do is we have a system that can either emulate users of any type across any portion of the world that visit websites and sort of collect all the data that loads, and we also take ad tags and run them in our own environment and actually get down to the source code to find specific issues. So think of us as a parallel universe to the reality, and that's where we monitor for things and catch things and send that information back to be either fixed by you, or we can send them to your partners in some cases and work directly with them to get them resolved.
Right. All right.
Does anybody else have any more questions for Alex or Matt? Well, if you can't think of any today or right this moment, they've got a stand over here, so you're more than welcome to pop by and ask them a question if one comes up. We're pretty much done. Thank you so much. Round of applause for Alex and Matt from the Media Trust.